the invasives versus the extirpated animals, and then like the where they're native in their native range, they're not doing great, but how they're just totally destroying these um other ecosystems that they haven't evolved in and have become invasive in. And so like how dogs can be used for that duality just gets me so excited. Like you could train your dog on, I mean, yeah, the odor would be different in those different environments because they're consuming different things, but like it would be so cool to have this dog that's like, oh, it's mink specific, and like, we go to Europe to extirpate or we get rid of the American mink there, and like find the American mink in the Americas and figure out where it's at. Like it would be so cool to see like what a dog might be able to do, like one team or two teams that are like working cohesively together to see how they did in both of those systems. Would be something. I mean, obviously it's still a small field, so those things haven't really gotten stitched together yet, and there's also the benefit of using like a local dog for each thing, whatever.
Yeah.
But I just like, it got me all excited about like the interface between hunters and biologists, and that's an interface that I'm finding that I'm liking more and more the more I'm getting into like the the dog side of field biology, of like how much we can learn from hunters,
Yeah.
especially like bird dog hunters. And so I don't know, the chapter 3 I was super excited about. Chapter 4, like, I liked it, but I did more of a skim for that one because I didn't enjoy the structure of it as much, but not so much
Yeah.
the content. It wasn't the content that I didn't like so much. But they um the muscle stuff is really interesting too, and the fact that those Bissell threads can be um they can look so similar to, I can't remember what else they said that the Bissell threads could look like. um
I just was on that page.
yeah. So anyways, it was like, it
Native
showed the importance.
freshwater bryozoans.
Uh-huh. So it showed the importance of like not just the dog's work, but like the handler's work. um And the muscle thing is so tricky because it's like a lot of the times we have to just trust the dogs. The verification is either not there until you like send things back to the lab. It's like one of those things. So there's just like the limitations of dogs and lessons learned, I think was a good point that they made. Especially like a dog having a week off and then being excited to like get back and train, like how that can give you false alerts. I think that's something like anyone can learn from.
Yeah.
Um, but specifically in this case where it's like we can't visually verify what the dog has found, like we need to make sure that that's a training opportunity, not something where we've deployed. So I don't know, the lessons learned I think was probably one of the more valuable parts of that. But um yeah, they were long chapters this time. So
Yeah, they
I
were.
found myself struggling to, I kept telling myself I'm going to read today and I would get a little bit done, thinking that I had like maybe 20 something pages to read. And I was like, oh, I've got like 70 pages to read.
Yeah.
And so I took it slower than I wanted to. So I ended up skimming chapter 4 more than I meant to fully get into it. Um, but yeah, I was super
Chapter
stoked
five
on
is a
chapter
cool one.
3.
It's a weird one
Uh-huh.
when we get there.
I
That's
feel
sewage pollution detection. It's just really different. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think the invertebrate, so chapter 4 was the invasive invertebrate species before they infest water bodies. It was, yeah, laid out almost much more like a scientific study. Um,
I think they clipped a scientific study into it.
yeah, yeah, and then it was kind of interrupted. Yeah, I agreed. It was a little harder to get through. And that's one of the things that I found overall a little challenging about this book was that because it's this collection of case studies from all of these different authors, and I think there was a relatively light touch from the editor. It is a little like it's not very cohesive to read.
Right.
Like I would read one chapter and really enjoy it and then get to the next chapter and be like, oh, I don't like this at all, or like, um Yeah, actually, so it's interesting that you liked chapter 3 because so for my full disclosure, I read this like 6 months ago, and I'm just going off of my notes that I haven't because I haven't had time to go back and read it again. Um,
Mhm.
I felt like chapter 3, there were parts of it where I was just like, this is so basic and so overarching and kind of
Mhm.
like I think this was the one that I remember reading where they were like, oh yeah, you could do this with detection dogs and you could do that with detection dogs, and like they were just kind of like pulling out like things and being like, this is a possibility. And I just kind of remember reading this and being like, I don't know what I'm getting out of this, like learning from this as a reader. Like it doesn't feel useful. Um, and I think, yeah, there was just a couple places that I remember reading when I was like sitting next to someone, and in 3.3 it says the class Mammalia, and then the first sentence is the class Mammalia contains many aquatic species. And I was just like, oh man,
Yeah.
is that a sentence that needed to make it through edits? Which
Yeah.
again is like it's fine. But I found that chapter pretty frustrating to read because of that. But then I really liked the insert that kind of goes from like pages 82
Yes. Yeah.
to 90 something on
Mhm.
the nutria. Like I
Oh
love
yeah,
that
the nutria
section.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That was great.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was
since I
really
was
well.
like skimming, that caught my eye. Like I didn't read everything, but that one part I read through, and that was really interesting, I thought.
Yeah. Really, really well done. And yeah.
But one
Yeah.
thing I thought was neat about that was they were talking about how having the handler and the dog was less impact to the soil, which is really delicate in the marshes. And that like if like a group of people were in there looking for the nutria, then
It-
they could cause a lot more compaction, and then that could cause the invasive plants to move in more easily too. So it was
yeah.
like lighter on the study area. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder how many like situations having a dog and handler is lighter on the study area. Because we always think about like the wildlife interaction and wanting to be more careful like on that side of it, but like this was kind of I felt like the flip side of it. And I thought that
Totally.
was interesting.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I actually liked even like there's some really good photos just on page 91, like just really demonstrating like the sort of work that this can be and like what your dog might need to be comfortable with. Um yeah, I think it was really well laid out and a really good example of just how useful this the dogs were in this sort of situation. And I think Mark continued working on this for a while. This was like a big ongoing project for them. Let's
I
see.
like the idea of like just using any like watercraft you can to like get into these like smaller spaces. Like a paddleboard, you could like remove the fin and like you could use that in like 3 inches of water
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to better
Yeah.
navigate.
Yeah. Um yeah, and then these are the sections that I found really frustrating where they were like otters. Dogs could be used to find otters. Dogs used to hunt otters, so it would work, right? Uh and there was some like good stuff in there about the challenges that humans have, but I also know, and maybe this stuff came out after this paper, but there's also been quite a few papers that have come out that actually Nia Richards, the editor of this book, was involved in, that found like otters sprains are really hard for conservation dogs and really challenging for detection dogs. So it's interesting that they didn't seem to cite any of those papers. So again, maybe they came out after this was written. But
Yeah, I mean, on 95 it says detection dogs have a higher rates of otter scat detection, can accurately distinguish between morphologically similar carnivorous species, and are less influenced by observer bias.
yeah, maybe that's a paper I'm thinking of. But I'm pretty sure Working Dogs for Conservation had a project that NIO worked on that they maybe it was like maybe this is true that it's higher rates of detection, but it was still really bad. It was still like
Okay.
many kilometers of shoreline to get like a couple samples.
Yeah, they don't really make it sound like that being an issue here.
Yeah, it was just and I could be misrepresenting it, but I really thought that they found that the dogs were better, but it was still like such a low rate of fines that it was not really anything to write home about. And it was like, okay, dogs are like better, but definitely not the silver bullet here.
Uh-huh.
Which, you know, sometimes that's all we can do. Like sometimes we just, you know, better is all we get. Let's see. What does putative mean? I think I looked this up when I was reading this. Putative. Generally considered or reputed to be. So yeah, 97 there was number like percentage of scats that were actually what they were recorded to, what they were guessed to be. Let's see, they were found. Okay, so here in the Northern Highlands of Scotland, 3 experienced human surveyors were tested on how successfully they could identify mink scats. 45 scat samples were identified by the surveyors as mink. However, genetic tests showed that none of these scats originated from mink. 45% were from pine martens, 45% were from foxes, and 6% were from otters. Human surveyors don't always have such a high error rate, but errors are common when working with carnivores, ranging from 14% error for Scott samples that are labeled as red fox, so putative red fox samples, 88% for wildcat scats, and 54% for snow leopard scats, which is actually interesting to me because I just went on a hike with the guy who used to run Panthera's snow leopard program, and we were just like talking about conservation dogs, and he was like, yeah, you know, I just don't think like conservation dogs would be useful for snow leopards because they poop on like the snow in the base of like mega remote places where it really could be nothing else. So I'm wondering like what this paper was pulling from and what those scouts were coming back as, because like based on a one-on-one conversation I just had, he was like, yeah, snow leopards, like you can't get that confused with anything else. There's no other like big hairy carnivores in the high alpine in Nepal like that. So I wonder what
Right.
yeah, 54% wrong is pretty bad.
And what page is that on? Because I remember reading
97.
that. 97.
Yeah. Let's see.
Of like, yeah. But those are all co-occurring, right? So
what are co-occurring?
the scat samples that they got wrong, that humans are having an error rate with.
So
Oh, there is 54% of snow leopard scat. Oh, yeah, okay.
yeah, so I'm curious,
Sorry.
like what, like 14% sounds right to me for red fox. If nothing else, because even if you're shit at identifying red fox, proportionally you're still going to be correct in most environments most of the time because it's just 90% red fox out there, you know. Like even if you're terrible at identifying it, you're just going to be right because of chance. Versus wildcat samples, I think that comes to the opposite problem where it's like it's really easy to say that something is bobcat when it's actually red fox or coyote, particularly because most environments just have a much higher proportion of red fox or coyote. But the snow leopard is just really interesting to me. Like I wonder what it was. And maybe I should just dig up Monterosso et al. 2013 to see.
I wonder, like, were these in the environment that they were identifying them, or like,
It sounds like the other one might not have been.
yeah.
Let's see where. Yeah, because that's true. Let's see, I'm just gonna pull this up now. Oh, here we go. Ooh, that sounds like a fun paper. Factors affecting the inaccuracy of mammalian mesocarnivore scat identification in southwestern Europe. Ooh, what a fun paper. This ident. What's the other paper cited in this?
Shineka.
Janeka. Okay, there we go. So I'll pull that one up. That'll be the snow leopard one, and I'll get back to y'all once I've skimmed these.
Percy.
Yeah, I wonder. I had another thought on the snow leopard thing, and I think I've lost it.
Okay, so crazy on 103, the multi-species detection using detection dogs and trained mink to capture muskrats. The detection dogs find the
Oh my
muskrats,
God, yeah,
and they
that's
send a mink
crazy.
in to get the muskrat. And I like that they use the term ferret out the muskrat.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
That's crazy.
That's wild. Like, what do the permits look like for that?
Yeah, that's so cool.
That's crazy. So
Um,
apparently the mink get better with experience at capturing and killing muskrats.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like, oh, I've got another salty pit right after this. I've got a lab mate right now who's currently in Yellowstone, and they use hounds to tree snow leopard, or not snow leopards, pumas in Yellowstone. I'm doing that like right now. So it is interesting, like sometimes people like give you pushback about getting permits to use conservation dogs when we're like, no, we really actively work to avoid wildlife impact. And then like
Right.
if you're trying to collar an animal, then they're like, no, you can just use a pack of hounds to chase them up a tree. It's fine. Like,
Yeah, they do that with black bears too.
yeah. Which, like, I understand it's different, but it's funny sometimes, like, the amount of pushback we get sometimes over using the dogs when then, like, you know, even sometimes in, like, the same park, just with a different study species, they're like, yeah, sure, just, like, get a bunch of hounds and chase them up a tree. It's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and then there was a section in 3.4 on page 104. They told us what ducks and geese look like, which made me really mad. That was I was just like, that should have been edited out. Cosmopolitan range, they have long, slender necks and bills which are shaped to most efficiently filter out small plants and animals from the water. Like, why is this in here?
And they're delicious. It goes on to say that they're delicious.
Oh, does it?
Highly prized as table birds.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that whole section. I was just like, and especially the crazy thing is, so I don't think I knew this when I was reading this the first time through, but I've been kind of working on trying to put together this like timeline of use of dogs in conservation and ecology from 1890 to 1999, because like after 1999, there's too many papers and I'm not touching that. But there were so many cool papers that happened up to 1999 using dogs, pointing and flushing birds in particular to get like blue-winged teal counts or like whatever. Like there's actually quite a bit of past literature that you could draw on for this section, and instead they spent like 2 pages telling us what ducks are.
Yeah, there was another one that sounded interesting in this section where they said that there's like some sort of like contraption that they use to break up the image of the dog for the ducks that like creates interest for the ducks. So
Yeah, that one's crazy.
So then they like trot along to like follow the dog instead of like being fearful of it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's insane and sounds like magic.
Yeah.
I'm looking for that now.
I'm guessing that's page 106.
Yes, it is. Second paragraph.
The blinder decoy is constructed as a series of louvered panels, and the dog is trained to trot quietly on the outside of these panels, thus alternately appearing and disappearing to the lead ducks. This visual illusion simulates curiosity in the ducks and which follow the dog enthusiastically in the tunnel trap. This is also the sort of thing where I'm like, I believe you, but I also kind of gotta see it.
Yeah.
Like, really? Really, this works?
Yeah, it's really wild. It makes me kind of think of like Temple Grandin of like
Oh, what's that?
her use of like understanding an animal's needs to like manipulate the way that they move.
Yeah.
And like that's like who came up with that where it's like yes, but if you only see the front half of the dog or the back half of the dog, but not the
Then they'll
whole dog,
approach it. Yeah. It's like, what?
they're interested and not scared.
Yeah. Nuts.
Oh, there's a footnote on that. That's like kind of interesting on the bottom of page 107,
Mm-hmm.
where the description came from. I feel like I want to get a hold of that, like reference.
Yeah.
Actually, Jay Shield is cited in this.
Someone's got to have this on YouTube, right?
Mm-hmm.
See, we're gonna see if we can find this. This is what this is for. YouTube.
Duck
What do we
blind,
call offense? Yeah,
duck decoy, duck blind,
those are
fence structure.
ducks follow dog, duck decoy, blind. Let's see.
That it was used for banding is really interesting.
Yeah, these are all like I don't know, 20 duck hunting tips in 3 minutes. How to teach your dog to run their first blind retrieve. Duck
Oh.
blinds by Redneck Blinds. Like they're all just like
Oh, because a blind could mean something
because a
else.
blind is also like a thing that you sit in to hunt.
Oh.
So
Hey, I just put the last part, the last one. I wonder if that's comes up with anything.
yeah, this might be something that's harder to search for than I.
Oh wait, I think
Did you find it?
I've oh book for trapping. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Oh, okay. Yeah, let me put something in the chat, a link. I'm looking at that last one, the Cornell Press,
Okay.
1983.
Bird
By
trapping is
Hans Bub.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this looks like a delightful book.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Let's
Oh,
see.
okay, here we go.
Let's see if it's on Sci-Hub.
There's another. Wait, what's that? It's at. Let's see if it. Oh, okay. Oh, it's searching for books for sale on that second link.
I'm gonna see if it's on Sci-Hub. If
Yeah.
Sci-Hub will open for me. And
Yeah,
Sci-Hub doesn't want to open. Oops, I didn't mean to close that. Oh well. Goodbye to that tab. Okay, let's see. So, okay, that was chapter 3. A lot of sources cited. Good job. And then, yeah, we get on into AIS. And yeah, again, I think this is kind of an interesting, useful like case study. Yeah, like I liked the explanation of like risk assessments and the workshops and like really showing like how much went into getting this off the ground and getting this ready to go. I think was a really useful perspective, especially sometimes like I feel like we get this sometimes in the group or sometimes I get it privately in my inbox where people are like, oh my God, I just started listening to your podcast and I'm so excited. I'm going to train my dog to do this and I'm going to get it off the ground, you know, and like, I think this would be a good chapter to have people read and be like, okay, this is what it took to get this very successful, very well thought out project up and running. And I, you know, like, this is what we need to be thinking about. It's not just getting the dog trained, unfortunately. Like, There's
Mhm.
so much to this that is beyond can your dog recognize and respond to odor. Um, what is the bow tie method? Do any of you remember what the bow tie method was? It's in Appendix 1.
Appendix.
It was something that they used during the like stakeholder meeting. The appendices of the way back.
Yeah. Show, it says bow tie method
Visual
shown.
guide.
Oh,
Oh, maybe it's a way of diagramming.
Yeah. Where the heck is the
Oh, on page 161 is what it is.
okay. I was looking in the way
It's
back of the book.
the diagram is shaped like a bow tie.
Oh, okay, interesting. So it's basically it's like a two-sided thing where on the left-hand side you've got all the ways that muscles get introduced. And then on the right-hand side you've got all of the downsides of the muscles. Why was this useful? This is like kind of an interesting bow tie method was used, offering a visual guide to map the threat, namely the introduction of the missiles, the potential vectors, and the consequences and controls, which brings together stakeholders and creates awareness about the consequences of inaction. I guess it's kind of a persuasive
Communication.
device to
Yeah,
be like,
yeah.
here's all the reasons we should care about this, and here are the things that we could control to make it better. That's a useful thing to keep in mind.
I like something you said a little bit back about like knowing all that's involved, and that this does have some that it worked out and some that it didn't. And it's not like it'll always work or it'll never work based on like one situation. I think that's kind of interesting. Like there's situations it's better dogs are better for, and situations maybe they're not. Or like the
Yeah.
snow leopard one you were saying. Like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think
to think about it, be able to think about that.
this program in particular, and I can't remember how much of this is I'm getting from here because like I'm kind of familiar with the program from working at Working Dogs for Conservation, and this program gets a ton of press. Like my dad and I watched a Netflix 20-minute thing about them while I was home over Christmas. Um,
This muscle one.
yeah. And um one of the things that I think, and they talk about this in this chapter and they talk about it elsewhere, that one of the biggest benefits for these dogs to this program is kind of the charisma factor. And I think particularly when they talk about, the number of boats that are coming in from the number of ports of entry, it's just not actually something that you could have a dog sniff every single boat. Even, I mean, I guess if they had like 50 dogs and they had dogs at every single port of entry at all times, but it's useful for charisma and awareness. And I think in the entire career of these dogs, they've only found however many. Sorry, I think this is my tire place. So I'm gonna take this call because they just called back again.
but yeah, I mean, I appreciate that this acknowledges some of the limitations for dogs. It wouldn't be useful to just use them whenever.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, uh, wouldn't be useful, but yeah, and there's some that it just becomes so entrenched with these invasives that it's like, what's a dog gonna do at this point?
Yeah, yeah. So when I was kind of first learning about some of these things, and then I think I was looking at someone in the UK and they had dogs that detected Japanese knotweed, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I looked around and I was like, oh, my dog would just go crazy. Like it's it's everywhere here. Um, and Same thing with the spotted lanternfly. Once it got here, there's definitely a threshold there where it's useful.
Yeah, I think a lot of times for these invasives, you can use them to confirm success of removal or to find these like edge or founder populations, which is why they're so good for like these boat examples. But I think like, I guess the point I was trying to make and making poorly when my phone rang is that I think the measure for success of the Alberta Mussel Program isn't necessarily like number of boats stopped, or number of things found, but like, yeah, this more comprehensive awareness. And I'm sure that they're strategic about when and where they deploy the dogs so that they're as effective as possible. But it's
Mhm.
the sole metric, particularly when you're talking invasives, shouldn't be number found. Because that number could be really, really huge, depending, yeah, like what you said with the Japanese knotweed, or it could be really, really small, but it doesn't mean that the dog was being more or less effective necessarily.
I mean, yeah, look at that shoreline on page 141. I mean, I mean, that's
Yeah, you don't need a dog for that.
no. And like, I mean, I don't even know, what do you do there? Do you just like leave it
don't.
be? You don't do
Yeah.
anything, I imagine. There's no cleanup to do. Like,
My understanding, particularly with the zebra mussels, is at this point, the only thing that you would be able to do would be to literally drain the whole lake. And nobody does that. Like,
yeah.
you're just, and like the thing that you get really cynical about is just like, well, fuck. Like, it only takes one boat to get through. And just like, you start thinking kind of like statistically, and it's just like, what are
Yeah.
we, like, we're buying ourselves years, probably.
Mhm.
You know, like that's really the situation we're in. We're not, I don't, I will happily eat my words, but I don't actually see it being all that likely that we make it to like 2050 without zebra mussels getting introduced to Lake Yellowstone.
Mhm.
You know, like there are only 4 states in the US left that don't have zebra mussels.
Mhm.
They're just going to get through at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, the time to stop it would have been like a long time ago when people weren't taking things seriously. And
Yeah.
if one lake had it and it was like, okay, it's really bad in that lake, you're just not allowed to bring any boats into this lake.
Well, and I
That
think part of the problem, I might be wrong on this, but I think with zebra mussels, part of it is they got introduced to the Great Lakes. And you can't
Mm.
Yeah.
contain the Great Lakes the way that you can contain like a little inland lake. Because once they're in the Great
Mm.
Lakes, like everything goes through there.
Mhm.
And they're all connected and they're all connected. You know, one of the things we talked about when I was doing the inspections in Yellowstone was part of the reason that we were focusing so much on Lake Yellowstone is if they got into Lake Yellowstone, then they can go down the watershed and affect everything else below them. So once they get into these headwater zones, you're just screwed.
Right.
And
And in that case, it's almost like we should be putting more effort into those like headwaters than anything else. And like just assume that every other lake is probably gonna, yeah.
yeah, it's tough. I mean, we're not the decision makers on these things, but it is something, you know, if nothing else for us as what's the word? Job security, I guess, is like maybe focusing on mussels makes a ton of sense because it's just there's always going to be a problem. But also maybe it makes no sense because at some point we're just going to lose this battle. And then if your entire business, like if you're mussel dogs out of California, like, and at some point the government is just like,
Yep.
we can't stop this
Yeah.
anymore, like, you know, she's going to have to pivot.
Mhm.
Which like I have not actually thought about whether or not that makes sense, and maybe it's going to work out fine and you can always pivot, but it's something to consider as far as particularly invasives. Or, you know, on the flip side, like the Saula Foundation with this species of antelope that hasn't been seen in the wild for 30 years. You know, like at what point are you going to just run out of funding and people are just going to be like, this thing doesn't exist? You know, we're chasing unicorns.
Mhm.
I would be pretty nervous about trying to build my career around something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets pretty dark.
Yeah, it does. It does. Ecology can be really depressing. Conservation more than ecology, I guess.
Truly, truly.
Yeah, let's see. Just kind of.
Freaking
It's
cool
hit-
though. And page 144, dog 5 was killing it.
Yeah, dog 5 was yeah. Dog
No
7,
one
I
higher
don't
dog
know.
1.
Dog 1 and dog 7, I don't know if they should get promoted.
Yeah.
Aw. Below the mean there, dog 1 and dog 7.
Yeah, below the
Maybe.
mean.
Yeah, dog 2 and 6 were like pretty close to the mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, dog 1, I don't know. I'd be curious, and this is like, and I understand why people don't want to publish this sort of stuff, but like, tell me about dog 1. Tell me about
Yeah.
dog 5. Like, were there
Right.
meaningful differences in
Yeah,
their
yeah.
personality, in temperament things? Was it purely an experience thing? Like, 7 is not really a sample size that tells us much, but
Right.
nobody ever actually dives into this. At best, we get like dog A versus B performed in these different ways, but like,
Wonder
why?
what's the yeah.
And I understand again, like I wouldn't want to say that dog 1 was Niffler. And then from then on out, any person who ever read that and then we said, hey, Niffler's going to be working on your project is going to be like, screw you, I don't want Niffler.
Right.
Barley.
Dog
Right.
1.
But you know, like, and like dog 1 might be a great area search dog who loves working large odor
Yeah.
cones. So dog 1 sucks at zebra
At-
mussel villagers.
It
But
looks
that
like
would
this
be
is
the
like
risk if you publish
buckets.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause
Sorry, I
then
didn't mean to interrupt.
no, it's okay. Yeah, because if you publish that with that dog's name on it, or that dog's or identifying characteristics, because like we wouldn't well, I guess we're in a situation where we could say all of our dogs are border collie mixes and we've got pretty even mix of male female, so it would be relatively easy for us to anonymize our dogs.
Well, even
But
if you didn't do well, yeah, so I mean sex might play into it, but even if you did something like this dog has more experience doing this type of work, would probably be a way of being like, okay, it's not a
yeah,
bad dog. It's not like it's just doing it as you said before of like this dog prefers open field searches. He was brought onto the project late, whatever. Like we
yeah,
just
this
needed
dog
another.
was considered our, you know, our apprentice dog. This was this dog's first project after being hired, you know.
Right, right.
Yeah, I mean,
Something
gosh,
like that.
that would be a really cool study actually to do this sort of thing, not just for a larger group of dogs and then look at the differences, but also do a bunch of different types of this test with the same dog to show
Mhm.
that, like, yes, dog 1 was terrible in our zebra mussel work, but you get him out on a wind farm or whatever, and dog 1 is, you know, right up there with dog 5, or maybe dog 5 is way worse.
Right.
That would be a
Yeah,
really
that would be cool. I
study
mean,
for
they don't
someone
need
with
to
time.
give away. Yeah. They don't need to give away like distinguishing characteristics to make the dog never be able to work again, but
Right. I mean, I think it would
what
be hard to have adequate explainers of the dog's experience levels in the published data without having some amount of identity. Because if you're saying at a minimum, you probably would need age, sex, breed. So
Yeah, I was
unless
trying to think what the objective measures would be for that, like characteristics.
it just,
That's
I feel like
interesting.
you'd have a hard time getting it through peer review if you're trying to say that they're if you're trying to explain what's going on with the dogs and you don't include some data that would probably, again, unless you're working with like Penn Vet Working Dog Center and you've got 50 Labradors that are all they're all labs and they're all in the same cohort, then you know you could certainly have it anonymized. But that's not the world that we work in, unfortunately. I don't know. So many studies, so little time. Yeah, I wonder. All right. Getting close to needing to take our break before the next call. I liked I just like on page 157 them showing practicing scenarios during inspector training, and like I'm sure getting the dogs used to like people walking up to vehicles and stuff like that is helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, and the cards that they hand out, you've been sniffed.
Really cute.
Hmm. Kind of like what you're saying. It's more about general awareness and you might actually have the dogs being a ambassador there might actually just make people better about washing, draining, drying their boats.
Yeah, they remember it.
It's like you're gonna like, oh, the dogs, of course. Like good thing we
Yeah.
made sure to do that. And so like maybe that's where the progress can actually be made of like getting people to hold themselves accountable and like be a little bit more knowledgeable about where their boat has been and that kind of stuff. So that maybe this is one of the things that can really make a difference on top of like the dogs actually being there to do the work.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. All right. I think we're gonna call it there and we'll come back in 12 minutes for our next call. So take a little break, let the dogs out, whatever you need to do, and we'll be back for that.
Sounds
All right,
good.
cool.
Bye.
See you guys.